Well, turning now to our Teagasc spot on the programme this week, and we're going to talk about the implications of the midterm review of the Nitrates Derogation. And that may be a mouthful, but it's an important one for many highly stocked farmers. And joining me on the line now is the Catchments Programme Coordinator with Teagasc, Mark Boland. So, good evening, Mark, and welcome to the programme. Now,
good evening, Michael.
The Nitrates Derogation in the spotlight again at the moment for during the midterm review. So what does this mean, and the derogation itself mean for farmers concerned?
Yeah, well, I suppose, Michael, under the Nitrates Action Programme, farmers are allowed to farm at a stocking rate of up to 170 kilos of organic nitrogen per hectare, and that's per year. Which takes into account any adjustments there may be in terms of exports of organic manures. And Ireland currently applies every 4 years to the European Commission for a derogation to the stocking rate limits. The Nitrates derogation disallows farmers to farm to a higher stocking rate limit of 250 kilos of organic nitrogen per hectare as opposed to 170. But it is, I suppose, subject to stricter environmental conditions whereby farmers apply for the derogation and must adhere to these conditions every year. So I suppose in terms of how many derogations we have out there, well, in 2023 there was approximately 7,300 applications submitted for a derogation. So this is an increase from around 6,700 in 2022. And most of that increase is as a result of the introduction of nitrates banding on dairy cows. So this is based on the level of production output from each herd, either in just 2022 or as an average of the 3 years from 2020 to 2022. Within this, then, the continuation, I suppose, of the derogation is very much dependent on the water quality status that we have in the country being maintained or improved. And Ireland, I suppose, is unique in that it's one of only a handful of countries within the EU that currently avails of a derogation. So we're very much, I suppose, in a privileged position at the moment. And the reason why we, I suppose, are continuing to have a derogation is because we're a mainly grass-based grazing system in Ireland with a long growing season. So that's, I suppose, justifiably allowed us to be granted a derogation up to now. But we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of our recent water quality trends to try and keep the derogation.
Well, this latest derogation renewal was granted with conditions, and what are those conditions, and how are they going to affect farmers in derogation?
Yes, I suppose, Michael, the nitrates derogation was last renewed in 2022, and it usually, as I say, runs for 4 years. So the current period will run up until the end of 2025 as it stands. I suppose what's different compared to previous approvals is that the current derogation was granted with conditions attached. And the main one of these was being that an interim water quality review would be carried out in 2023. So this has been carried out, or was carried out, by the EPA, and the deadline for carrying this review out was 30th of June 2023. So within the review, areas were identified that are not meeting the water quality criteria set out by the Commission. And any of these areas will be subject then to additional measures from the 1st of January 2024. So farms within the areas identified by the EPA who have been granted a derogation, they will now be limited, or likely to be limited, to a new organic stocking rate of 220 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year versus the previous limit of 250 in the derogation. The review contains 4 different water quality assessment criteria which were set out by the Commission as part of Article 12 of the derogation decision, and they're to be applied to areas that are draining into polluted or at risk of pollution waters, or areas which display worsening trends in water quality. So the four criteria are as follows. The first one is that there's an average nitrate concentration of greater than 50 milligrams per litre of nitrates from the year 2020 to 2022. The second one then is higher average nitrate concentration in 2022 compared to 2021. So this basically means if there's a difference of over 1 milligram per litre of nitrates between the average nitrate concentrations for the individual years, so 2022 versus 2021. The third one then is the eutrophic status within a water body, which basically refers to, I suppose, the level of nutrients entering our water bodies, be it the main ones would be nitrates and phosphorus. And depending on the type of water body you have, whether it's fresh water or salt water, either one of phosphorus or nitrates can be a problem because it leads to increased algae growth, and that in turn then can take the oxygen out of the water body and can harm the beneficial ecology within the water body. So the last one then is, I suppose, the chance of a water body becoming eutrophic or where it displays a stable or worsening trend. So it's basically comparing the 2022 data with data from 2021 to see if there's a chance of a water body becoming eutrophic in the near future.
Well, looking at this data then and comparing the results of the review and their impact on a derogation, what are the findings from the EPA?
Yeah, so basically, it's only in recent weeks the EPA have published the results of the review in a report which is titled Water Quality Monitoring Report on Nitrogen and Phosphorus Concentrations in Irish Waters 2022. It's a long title, but the result, I suppose, of the review is that the EPA have produced a colour-coded map of Ireland. And this map shows the areas identified on the map by either in red or white. So the red belong to those that the EPA have decided have met the criteria set out by the Commission. So therefore, as it stands, the areas in red will be required to carry out additional measures as part of the derogation from 2024 onwards. When one of them obviously is the 220 kilo nitrogen per hectare per year limit. And altogether, the review found over 44,000 kilometres squared of land, which they identified in the red areas on the map. So it's a substantial amount of land across the country that falls within the red areas. I suppose within that, surprisingly, there was some areas around the country which are, I suppose, seen as being intensive areas for farming, which have not actually been identified in red on the map. And as things stand, they will be allowed to continue to farm at 250 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year if they are in a derogation. Now, among these areas are much of our own county in Wexford, areas of West Cork, which would be intensive dairying areas, and also much of the area within Waterford, which is also a very intensive farming area. So these would have also previously been identified in previous EPA reports as being very much nitrate risky. So it's therefore a big surprise to many that they were not identified in red on the map. But I suppose these maps are kind of subject to change between now and the final decision. So we just kind of have to keep an eye on it just to see if they'll actually end up falling into the red area before the final decision is made. One final point on the monitoring of the review was that the data set that the EPA used for their monitoring program for this review was that of the Nitrates Directive monitoring program. which is essentially a smaller subset of the larger full national monitoring programme, which is used to implement the EU Water Framework Directive. So the areas on the monitoring carried out for the review, I suppose, were a smaller data set than what you would normally find from the EPA reports, which are on a much bigger scale.
Well, will the derogation then continue beyond the current phase?
Between now and I suppose the end of September, this will be assessed by the Commission before they make a final decision on the 220 kilo limit, which is, as it stands, going to come in for areas of the country in January 2024. So hopefully by the end of September we will know a bit more about what direction we're heading in. But it is worth noting that the review, again, as I said earlier, is not a final decision as of yet, so there could be subject to changes or some changes before this decision is made.
Okay, Mark, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for that update on the mid-term review of the nitrates derogation there. That's Mark Boland from the Teagasc Catchments Programme. Mark, thanks very much.
No problem, Michael. Thank you very much.